Hi, my name is Mohammed Khan, and you're watching my blog. And this is part of the Unemployed GM Podcast Network, which is something that I'm looking forward to developing over the coming, weeks and months. Uh, for now, this is mostly kind of a stream of consciousness thing. So, um, I plan on doing a vlog today about Pakistan's decision to drop Azam Khan, but I decided to pivot to a completely different topic and try something else. After I read an interview by Cheteshwar Pujara on Cricinfo, and it was a really interesting interview. Pujara's, I watched his entire career, and before that, I watched Rahul Dravid's career. And Rahul was such an amazing player that you would think that it's going to take a while for India to replace Rahul Dravid. But 3 years after Dravid retires, there he is. There's Cheteshwar Pujara, and he's had a great career. And for a while now, I've had this interview kind of in the hundreds of tabs that I've opened. This has been one of the interviews that's been there, and I've been wanting to read it with a keen eye on writing notes because I really valued Pujara's career, and so I that's what I did. I sat down, I read it, I made notes, and let me share with you, sorry, why I did that. Um, my path to cricket has been, or sports in general, has been very much. Sorry about that. Has been very much non-traditional. Most people start as kind of, they were interns, or they start at a lower level before they make it to the bigger job. And for whatever reason, I didn't have that opportunity. And you might think, hey, hey, if you can get to the front of the line, uh, without having to go to the back, I mean, what's better than that? But I think the way the world works, I think there is a lot of value in kind of going through a process. And I think while initially it helped that I was able to kind of cut the line, not that I did anything wrong. I met the owner of a team. He was surprised that I knew so much about West Indies cricket. We started working together. Next thing I know, I was working in the draft. I became the general manager, and had some success. And while it was an amazing experience, I do value that process, right? Coming through the bottom, and then maybe having a little bit of that mentorship. And I say that, because, I would like to, I say that because I'm very much self-taught. I loved sports growing up. I loved, cricket in particular. Um, and while I felt like I had this kind of ability to kind of identify talent, the ability to kind of evaluate it, the ability to think about it in the larger context of building a team. I think those are instinctive things, right? They're human, they're inherent. And while those instincts are incredibly valuable, I think they still help me to this day. You can't excel consistently without a method, right? There has to be a process in place for you to make the right decisions over and over and over again. And you need to develop over time, right? So the skills that I possessed, when I was with the Jamaica Talos, for example, I think many of those skills have been enhanced over the years. My understanding of different topics has improved. And one way that I've kind of educated myself is actually through these articles, right? So, when I see a Pujara article on Cricinfo, and this was written wonderfully, and it was a wonderful interview by Nagraj Golapodi. I hope I'm saying his name right, and obviously he writes a lot of stuff on Cricinfo. He's an excellent writer. And one of the things that I've done over the years is I've read a lot. That's just part of my daily routine, and and so one thing that I picked up is the idea of kind of deconstructing articles, right? So I don't deconstruct every article because I don't have time to do that. But the ones that I find to be valuable, I like to actually sit down, read it really carefully, and make notes, and embed those notes in my process, right? So when you read an article about a player, there's an opportunity to kind of develop your process around scouting, talent evaluation, and so I came across this article, and I read it today, and it was incredibly insightful, well written, good questions, and I wanted to share that with you. And it's possible that some of you might find this to be very boring, and other people might actually like this. So I'm going to give it a shot. And again, would love to hear what people think about it at the end. I just turned on my comments. I didn't really know what I was doing before. So I think Hamad Ahmed, not I think Hamad, shared that with me, who watched one of the episodes that I did. So thank you for that, Hamad. Um, and so, what am I looking for when I'm reading these articles, right? So, when I'm reading these articles, I'm mostly looking for clues, triggers, you can call them, buzzwords. And players will, I always say this thing when I'm thinking about talent or evaluating talent. Players will tell you who they are, either by their actions, by their data, or by what they say, right? And you can confirm that in the data and in the actions, right? So, when players share these buzzwords, um, you can embody certain things about them, right? Some of those things are going to be tangible, some of those things are going to be more intangible. So while what we've seen in cricket is a real data revolution, there's so much talk and conversation about data is used more now than ever before in the decision making process. I think one of the things that's been kind of lost in that is the importance of evaluating the whole player. And I think there's a certain expediency, in cricket these days that that shouldn't be that way. And I think it's because cricket's kind of marriage with data has been kind of inorganic. It's very much been taken from somewhere else and incorporated into cricket without kind of going through its own journey, if you will, right? And so, um, the ingress of data, while as I said, is valuable, there's also an intangible part of evaluating a player, right? The things that don't meet the eye, right? The human aspects of the player, right? So we often, and I always just say this to my players or people that I worked with, is my fundamental belief about talent evaluation and general management of running a team is that while the numbers are incredibly important, the data is important, you can never lose sight of the fact that you're dealing with human beings, right? Behind those players or in front of those players, in front of the data is human beings. Their sons, their brothers, their husbands, their fathers, their friends. They're part of a community. They have certain beliefs. They go through things just like us, and sometimes those things are manifest itself. Those things manifest themselves on the field, right? A player has a bad day. Sometimes that's has nothing to do with cricket, right? And we often think about that. We often think about those results as being outcomes of not working hard enough, making mistakes or whatever it may be. And sometimes it's not that, right? There's an entire world that is going around these players, before games, after games, away from tours, when they're at home, and we need to understand that, right? And so when you're going through the scouting process, you really want to get to know the player. So, when I did this thing in 2007, I sent this to Andy Flower at that time, and Andy was just coming in as England coach, and he had retired from Zimbabwe, and he's by far, in my opinion, the best coach of this generation, right? When you think about the greatest cricket coaches, when you think about, for example, the greatest football coaches of all time, right? You think about Cruyff, you think about Michels, you think about Guardiola now. You look at NCAA men's basketball, you think about John Wooden. You think about Phil Jackson in the NBA, Red Auerbach. These guys won a lot. They were really successful at that tried and tested methods that they were able to replicate over and over again. Andy Flower is that version in cricket, right? Cricket doesn't have that many great coaches, in my opinion. But Andy is definitely, the one guy, right? He is the special coach in cricket. And, I'm happy. I've never, apart from one email 15, 16 years ago, I've never really spoken to Andy, but I really respect the work that he's done. Um, he's amazing in everything that he's been able to accomplish, not only for England, really transforming in England cricket. Let me just go back. My conversation with Andy Flower stemmed from this, from me trying to get into cricket. Number one, explaining some of the things that I will explain on this vlog, and I'm going to explain in this particular one. Um, and it was Michael Yardy. That was the catalyst, right? Michael Yardy was England's number 4 batsman when during I think it was a Champions Trophy in India in 2006. And Michael Yardy was a really good county player for Surrey Surrey or Sussex or I think it was Sussex for a really long time. And but he was kind of like this bits and pieces, more of a batting all rounder. But really, he was a guy that you would bring in at number six, number seven, and at that time, England was trying a lot of those guys, right? It was, Vardy was there, Jamie Dalrymple was another one from Middlesex, and Yardy was batting at 4, and essentially I was like, I've had it, right? I've had it with cricket, poorly diagnosing players, poorly evaluating them, asking them to do things. Your one day team is never going to be successful with Michael Yardy batting at number 4. Now, your one day team could be successful with Michael Yardy in the team, but not at the number 4 position, right? So, how do we think about these things, right? How do we think about the number 4 position in one day cricket? And these are the things that I shared with Andy Flower. Um, in in this really long project that I did that really I didn't get much for, but it really became the bedrock of later on of how I thought about the game, and it informed my success. I think with Jamaica and generally how I think about the game. So, let me talk about this article briefly, and some of the things that I took away from it, and maybe these things can help you as you build your own process, right? Specifically for those people who are either passionate about the game or those people who actually want to work in the game, right? There's more opportunities now. There's more private capital in cricket. And when there's private capital, there's more meritocracy. And when there's more meritocracy, you see people that are coming from non-traditional backgrounds to work in the game, right? So, one of the things and this is not in order, but this is how I processed it. So one of the things that Pujara mentions, in this article is he mentions the word passion, and there's a great quote: "My passion has become my profession." When I develop a scouting report, I ask questions, right, about a player, either directly to him, if I'm actually working with a team, or if I don't have that access, I ask these questions to myself, right? I do this research. Does he love the game, right? Does he love the lifestyle? I always ask this question: does he love the game, or does he love the lifestyle? And with Pujara, it was clear that for him, he loved the game, right? He loved the game, he loved the work, and it comes across, right? This is from the horse's mouth, right? My passion has become my profession, and you want that, right? When you're evaluating a player, does he have passion for the game? There's some recent things that happened. I noticed in West Indies cricket, for example, players, a player missed a flight, right? Does that happen if you're truly passionate about what you're doing? You're passionate about your work. You really care. Um, you're honest with your profession. You respect your profession. You respect your teammates. And I think you have to ask that question, right? When you're building and developing that scouting report, you have to have a paragraph or a couple of sentences about that. Is this person passionate about his job? Is he passionate about the sport? And with Pujara, obviously, it's very clear, right, with the way he bats, everything about him. Uh, Another thing I like to ask, or another thing that I like to kind of understand is how competitive is this person, right? And again, in this article, there's a great quote from Pujara, and he says, "I hate losing. I hate losing." And those are some of the things that you see that's a common pattern, a common theme amongst the best players, right? You think about Michael Jordan, you think about Wayne Gretzky, you think about Roger Federer, Kobe Bryant. They all hated losing, right? These guys were all ultra competitive, and I bring that up more now because of what I've seen over the last couple of weeks in Pakistan cricket, right? Pakistan cricket recently played against Afghanistan in Sharjah, lost the series 2-1, won the final game, and because again we're not that educated about the game, and we're quite gullible. The PCB essentially said, "Hey, we're going to send out essentially the best players from the PSL. We're going to reward those guys, and there's something to be said for that. We're going to send those guys to Sharjah. We're going to give them some game time, and whatever happens, happens." And I think a lot of fans took that to be, "Hey, we're experimenting. This is the way to go. England does this, so because England does it, it's the right way to go." And it essentially means that winning and losing doesn't matter, right? And for me, that a fan can think about things that way. No player, no great player, no great general manager, no great coach can ever think that way, right? Because winning does matter. Now there are different degrees of importance to every game. There are games in cricket where nothing's at stake, right? But nevertheless, you're a professional. You're playing the game. There is an opportunity to be successful. There's an opportunity to win. Whoever go who I've never heard of someone going into a game not wanting to win. Um, but you want to see that quality, right? Some players don't care, right? They're not the best teammates sometimes, but you want players to have that competitiveness, right? Because I think one of the things that I believe is that winning breeds good habits, and losing often breeds bad habits. And so winning is really important. And when I listen to Pujara say, or I read and I hear him say, I hate losing. Those are the types of things that I want to hear from players, right? That I'm building a team with 11 guys on the field that hate losing, that want to win, that desperate to win. And if you think about the great teams from Pakistan, and I bring up Pakistan A because I'm Pakistani, but B because I suspect a lot of the people that have been watching are Pakistani, and I wanted to reference that. If you think about Pakistan's history, the teams that were the best team that Pakistan ever had was those 80s teams, right? That were led by Imran Khan, and Javed Milad was the vice captain. Both of those guys were super ambitious, super competitive. Pakistan never wins a World Cup without the competitiveness of Imran or Javed, and Javed Milad. And so it's a really important quality, right? So when you're evaluating a player, ask yourself that: is this guy competitive, right? Is he just throwing away his wicket? Things like that. Like, does he care? How does he react in good moments and in bad moments, right? The other thing is, uh, and I'm going to go down the list, and hopefully it'll be quicker than it has been so far. Process. It's a word that's thrown around a lot in sports. Process. And when I think about a player, I often wonder what his process is off the field, on the field. How does he go about his business, right? When we go to work, we have a workflow, right? People have made billions of dollars on this, right? There's an entire industry based on CRMs and workflows and SaaS and et cetera, et cetera. And what is a player's SaaS, CRM, right? What is his process? And Nagraj says this about Pujara in this interview: by being honest to his beliefs, sticking religiously to his routines, and staying disciplined, he has built a career that ranks among the finest of his era. Now, you want to learn more about that, right? When you're going through the evaluation process, you want to learn more about, hey, what's your process like? And part of that is, learning from the player directly, but it's also learning from the coaches, people who have coached him over the years, people who have been in the same dressing room, peers, um, his own family. That's all part of the scouting process, right? The scouting process doesn't begin and end with being on Cricket Info or being on CricViz, or whatever program that you're using, or whatever access to data that you have. It's a lot more than that, right? And so reading articles, right? If you're a general manager of a team, reading these types of articles on your players is incredibly important. Obviously, there's a connect now between process, temperament, concentration. These are the other words that came up in this article: temperament, concentration. And of course, with Pujara, one of the things that you associate with his success is his concentration, right? He doesn't always have the high strike rate. One of the best innings that he's ever played was a 50 against Australia in the fourth innings, where I believe he batted again. He played 200 deliveries to get India over the line, right? I think he faced 11 or 12 body blows, and I'll talk about this later. The guy he's tough. He has a great temperament. He has a great concentration. And he says this in the article: I live a very simple life, and that's the reason I don't get distracted by too many things, right? This is not a person that's very much into kind of all the things, all the trappings of international cricket. He's very much a simple guy who loves the game, who loves his craft. And he talks about some of the things that he does outside the game, right? He talks about yoga. That yoga has really helped him develop his concentration even further. And that reminds me of two things that I think could be valuable for people that are listening. One is a book called Range by David Epstein, and he talks about a lot of things, but one of the things that he talks about is how valuable it is to play different sports, or how valuable it is to kind of be a generalist. That exposure helps you in in the area that you're actually a specialist, right? And so, for example, sorry, I'm having some allergies. Muhammad Hafiz comes to mind, right? As a Pakistani, that Muhammad Hafiz became a power hitter in T20 cricket once he started playing golf. And because of the angle of your golf swing, right, it's very much, in baseball they talk about this thing called this statistic or this idea called a launch angle, and this really much is very much about how you bring your bat through the strike zone, right, and the ability to kind of lift the ball. When you have a higher launch angle and you can lift the ball in the air, you can hit more home runs, you can be more dynamic. And golf is a really so every cricketer, just like Muhammad Hafiz played golf, and he's mentioned this many times, and it improved his power hitting. If I was running a cricket board, for example, golf would be a big part of our program, right? I would encourage players to play golf because it would improve their power hitting. Um, Another word, a buzzword or trigger that I find to be really important is the word approach, right? What is your approach? How are you approaching your job? How are you approaching training? How are you approaching your innings? How are you approaching this situation? These questions are important to ask, and then they're important to answer, right? And you can find the answer by watching the game. You can find the answer by looking at the data, and it's really an amalgamation of everything, right? So it's not just the one thing. It's multiple things. Being able to understand them, putting them together to create one thought. And Pujara says, for me, when I'm batting out there in the middle, I try and keep my mind blank. I try and just focus on what I have to do. And to do that, you need to also forget what the bowler will do. Because in cricket, you have to be in the present. You have to look at the ball and let your instinct follow. For that, you need to prepare well. You need to know what you are going to face. Utilize your muscle memory. It is not just concentration on the field. The combination of things that you've done beforehand is equally important, right? And essentially, what what Pujara is saying is that because of his practice, because of his routine, because he's mastered that, because he's put so much time into it, because he's put so much thought into it, there is a balance, there is a calmness at the crease, where he can just allow his talent to flow. And while he is anticipating what's going to happen, he's not predetermining what's going to happen. And obviously there are aspects to cricket where predetermination is a good thing, right? You don't want to just be completely reactive. But as someone who's played the game at a very low level, at a club level, or just with friends, you find that, for example, when you're overthinking things, right? You're overthinking what you're going to do. You kind of Those are the moments that you're not able to do, right? You're not able to be successful because you're overthinking it, right? You're holding your bat too tight. You're thinking, I have to hit a six on this delivery, and you're not able to just let your talent flow. And essentially, that's kind of what Pujara is saying. But the word approach is really valuable because he has a specific approach and he believes in that and he sticks to it. And so think about that. What is the XYZ player's approach? Um, and this feeds into lifestyle off the field, something I talked about earlier, and this feeds into his temperament and concentrations. He says, Nagraj asks, I'm guessing you don't spend a lot of time on your phone. He's like, well, Pujara laughs. No, I don't. Apart from talking to friends and family, not much. I do agree. Not much. So there's one less distraction. Also, I try and avoid social media. As a sports person, you need to be active on social media. That's a different thing, but I don't take it to heart. He essentially doesn't take it to heart. He doesn't think too much about it. And he doesn't actively participate in it, even if he knows what's going on. He also talks about domestic cricket, right, and how valuable that's been. Obviously, cricket is going the T20 route. A lot of international cricket, bilateral cricket is now T20 cricket. For him, domestic cricket is really valuable, and he talks about this here. And it has definitely, without any doubt, been important. If I look back a few years when COVID-19 was around, that was a time I had a little bit of a challenge in finding my rhythm, right? Because he wasn't playing regularly. Cricket, sport, everything in life really is about repetition, right? The reason I would say is I didn't play enough domestic cricket to be in touch with the game. I feel that no matter how much time you spend in the nets, playing first class matches is important to be successful at the international level, especially in the test format. You need that preparation. You need that time in the middle to find your rhythm, to find your concentration, even for your feet to move. And I mentioned to a lot of players when I was with the Talawas and St. Lucia Stars, play domestic cricket, play domestic cricket. How can you hit 100 or score consistently at the highest level when you've never experienced it, right? And what better format to experience that or to develop that than the 4 day game, right? Or the 5 day game. The ability to kind of be in different circumstances, different environments. So what's happening in cricket now is players are essentially doing one thing. So Asif Ali is a really great example of that, right? Asif Ali comes in a very specific situation. He'll come in this 15th over, the 16th over, the 17th over. Sometimes he'll even be held back to like the 18th or 19th over to say that he can only hit pace, a certain type of pace at the end of an innings, right? You can't build an innings, you can't rebuild an innings. There's only one thing that he can do. And I disagree with some of that, but that's kind of how he's been painted, right? And that's reflected in the fact that he has weaknesses in first class cricket, which he doesn't play anymore. That he's not been able to develop his technique, and rather than go back and play that format for second 11s or even great cricket, he's just become a white ball player, and that's part of the economics of the game. But if you want to be a full player, if you want to be holistic, if you want to be able to adapt to different things, you have to play red ball cricket. There's so much that you can learn about yourself from playing that format. And he goes on to say, if you are just playing white ball cricket and if you aim to play Test cricket, then you should definitely play Ranji Trophy. Otherwise, you will eventually get exposed at the international level. If you look at examples of whoever has done well in Test cricket, they would have played some red ball cricket, Ranji Trophy, Duleep Trophy, India, rest of India. The Indian domestic structure is really good. They can do that obviously because of the economic power that they have. But domestic cricket, playing domestic cricket is important. Playing that form of the game is really important. Red ball cricket, right? I would say that if I was running a cricket board, in your contracts, there's a certain amount of domestic cricket that you need to play. There's a certain amount of 4 day cricket that you need to play, and I would mandate it. And you have to get your best players on side, and ask them to do that. Right? You have to build your schedule around that. Um, Two other things that I want to say before I end. One is self awareness. Right? Pujara is clearly a really smart guy, really intelligent, comes from a good background, and he's clearly self-aware, and he says this in the article. In 2010, my first overseas series, I had a tough time. I batted at number 5 or number 6. He bats at 3 now. Dale Steyn and Morning Merkel were at their peak. I still remember I spoke to Rahul Bhai, talking about Rahul Dravid, that I'm finding it difficult because I've always played on Indian pitches where the bounce is low and the pace is slow. So he realizes that, that his background or the culture that he grew up in is hurting his ability to acclimate to South African pitches and these types of bowlers. And in South Africa, I'm finding it difficult. Dravid gave him great advice. I worked on that. I ensured that whenever I came to South Africa, I would do well. And I put those things into practice, and that's why I've been successful. Think about all those players from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, wherever. All those players, England, Australia, all those players that were hugely talented but never improved. And why is that, right? We often blame the system. I always do that, right? As a Pakistani fan, as a guy who's seen so many guys come and go, I always say, hey man, it's a system. And it is a system, right? The system it's not the perfect environment to be successful, right? But you also have to take blame, right? So while it is partially the system, you have to look in the mirror, right? You can't control the system, but you can control what you do, right? And one of the things that I'm looking for when I'm looking at players and the human side of players, I'm looking at people who are self-aware. I'm looking at people who are eager learners. I'm looking at players that are coachable. And a great example of this is Kumar Sangakkara, who was on my Talavas team. Kumar, he was at the end of his career. He was a great player, right? Kumar Sangakkara is one of the all-time great cricketers, all-time great guy as well, professional, perfect guy, right? And I remember watching him closely in the nets, a lot of times working with Paul Nixon on his wicket keeping, and just doing regular drills that wicket keepers do. And Paul Nixon was a wicket keeper himself, and so he'd be working with Kumar, and every once in a while, very rarely, but every once in a while, Paul would say something to Kumar about wicket keeping or about batting or whatever, and I never saw Kumar not listen to him with keenness, right? Even at that age, 37, 38, 39, whatever he was when he was when we worked together, Kumar was still trying to learn, right? He was still open to being coached. And then Pujara seems to be the same, right? Still eager to learn, searching for knowledge. That's what you want to be looking for when you're evaluating players, but that's also the culture that you want to create, right? You want to give players that opportunity to be a part of that culture. Now, whether they take it or not, that's up to them, but you want them to kind of be a part of that culture. Um, the last thing is toughness, and I mentioned this earlier. You look at, we always associate, I get the sense, and I could be wrong, we associate toughness in the subcontinent by power, by money, um, by physique. And really, what toughness is, or resilience, is really in the mind. And the best innings, and Pujara alluded to this, was in 2021, where he took 11 body blows. This is from India Today. Chasing. This was when Virat Kohli, I think he was on paternity leave, went back to India. Rahane was um, captaining. India wins that series with a lot of players that weren't in the original squad, a bowling attack that wasn't in the original squad, and Pujara was a big part of that. And in the fourth innings, chasing down, I think, let me just see what it was. I have this here. So this was the fourth test in Brisbane. Australia bats first, scores 369 runs. Marnus Lavashani scores 108. India, plays second innings, 336 all out. Rear guard action from Washington Sundar and Shardul Thakur. In the second innings, or the third innings of the game, Australia scored 294. And in the final innings, India has to chase down 328. And Pujara bunt scores the 89. He scores it, at lightning speed. Well, not lightning speed, but he scores it quickly for test standards. Shubman Gill plays a great innings at the top, but it's really Pujara's innings of 56. It holds it together on a really difficult pitch. He scores 56 off of 211 deliveries. He's out there for 314 minutes, by far the most in the game. And this is what he says. Well, this is from the article, and there's a quote in here as well. India's batting mainstay, Cheteshwar Pujara, has said that he took 11 blows on his body in the fourth and decisive test against Australia because he said that defending with the bat was not safe. He goes on to say that there was an option to defend with the bat, but I felt that that was not a safe option. And so I preferred to take body blows from Australian quicks. So the Australian quicks in this game were um, Mitchell Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins, right? Your regular, your run-of-the-mill Australian attack, Cameron Green as well. And because if the ball hits your glove, it could go to short leg, slip, gully, or I could get caught behind. So I wanted to rule that option out completely. And that is why I was taking the blows to my body. Getting hit on the helmet was not ideal, but I was not worried about it. And there was a reason. And he goes on to say that essentially that I just needed a bad time. I just needed a bad time. And the fact that he was able to bad time, got those really great innings. He was part of the partnership with Gill, and later on with Rishabh Pant, and India wins, and it was a historic win. And so what I normally will do is I'll read this article, I'll make these notes, and then I'll take some of these notes and I'll embed them into my process, right? Into how I think about scouting, how I think about talent evaluation, how I think about player development. You can even use these as a reference point, right, for players, right? Share this with one of your players that's struggling. Share this with a player that wants to be great. Share this with a player who are trying to teach some new things. And I think Pujara, he's really been a fantastic cricketer throughout his career. And it was fun to read this article. It was a great piece by Nagaraj. And I'm a critic of Cricket Info sometimes, but they also do a lot of good work. And this piece by Pujara was excellent. And so with that, I want to close by saying that, there's a lot of different ways to learn, right? You could do a lot of learning on your own. So think about it, right? Read articles, listen to podcasts, make observations, write those things down, and use that to inform your decision making. I think the people that are the best at this are able to kind of reconcile a combination of data and rules and the subjective part of the evaluation process. And they're able to bring those two things together to make decisions. And I think the people that do that best are the ones that have the sustainable success, right? They're the ones that win the titles and win championships and do other things. And so, again, I'm really grateful, that I can that I can share some of this. If it's valuable to you, I look forward to doing more of these. I read a ton of articles. A lot of them are not even related to sports. And we can, identify certain patterns, right? These are the patterns that you see in this article about Pujara are the patterns of players that are really, top players, that are players that have had a lot of success. And you take away these things, and those are the players that they may be hugely talented, but they don't reach their potential. And I wanted to share, Pujara's stats at the end. And while his international stats are really great, he averages 44, strike rate of 44, 1900s, 35 50s. His first class average is staggering: 245 games, 405 innings, 18,658 runs, with a high of 352. So when he scored that 350, that was when it triggered that this guy is special. I remember reading an article, a guy in India scored 300 runs. And Pujara, I think, has scored 300 runs multiple times. It's not like just the one time. He's done it multiple times. Average 51, 5,600, 75 50s. That's a phenomenal career, right? We always measure a guy's international career. We forget that he's had this entire domestic career. And the guy is a true great. You would never think that India would find another Rahul Dravid. They did. Although I think Dravid was better, and Dravid was better. If you look at total career, everything else. But Pujara was also special, and probably if it wasn't as competitive in India, probably would have played the shorter formats more than he did. So, um, a really, really great player. So, with that, I want to thank everybody, whoever's watched this or whoever's going to watch this. I hope this wasn't too boring. I'm still working out different things about my camera and my environment and different things like that. I'm learning as I go as well. So again, if this was valuable, please leave your comments. Even if it wasn't, that's fine too. Happy to be criticized. And with that, thank you, and look forward to coming back again. I definitely want to get into the Azam Khan topic, and there's other topics as well that I want to get to.